Here's the question. Is it safe in America? Is it safe to live in the USA? Well, I live here. I've lived here my whole life, okay? And I can't speak for other countries, but I certainly can speak for the USA. And long story short, we'll get into it more as the video goes on. There are certain places that are extremely safe. No worries at all. And of course, certain rare places that might be more dangerous. And then, of course, even in higher crime areas, you're going to have to be really looking for a bad time to get one, if that makes sense. Amongst all the crazy headlines, overblown and bizarre in certain cases, I overall do feel safe here in the USA. This comes to us from the infographic show. This will be linked in the description down below as always, so you can watch the whole thing uninterrupted. Let's go.
Safe to live in the USA. First of all, as we told you in our other shows about a country's safety, how much danger you might face as a visitor or a resident all depends on where you live and what kind of lifestyle you have.
Right.
Someone visiting Pleasant Grove, Utah to see the Strawberry Days Festival will no doubt be in safer hands than someone going to Baltimore with the express intention of getting in on the local heroin dealing scene.
Exactly.
We will talk about some parts of the country, but look more at general statistics, what the media says, and what governments say about visiting the USA. As we've looked so many times at what the American government says about visiting other countries, let's now see what other governments say about the safety of America. The UK's Foreign and Commonwealth Office opens its section about the US with something about volcanoes going off in Hawaii, but we're not too concerned about that. Visitors to the US have as much chance of being cooked in hot lava as a piano falling on their head from a high building. Around 3.8 million British nationals visit the United States every year. Most visits are trouble-free, we are told. So what other dangers are there? Terrorism could occur anywhere, and attacks are indiscriminate. You might contract the Zika virus in Florida or Texas, or
and this goes without saying. I know most people, reasonable people, know this. Terrorist attacks and, mass shootings, all these different things, they're absolutely tragic. They're horrifying. They suck. Every way you cut it, they suck. But let me just remind you, they can happen anywhere, and they have happened anywhere. When we're talking about the U.S., they've happened in, high crime areas, and they've happened in extremely safe areas. And unfortunately, they've happened in other countries. I've seen headlines and read about terrorist attacks in way more places than the U.S. So I know that goes without being said, but this is not a uniquely U.S. thing, if you ask me. It may happen, if you bring up numbers, it may happen more. Certain crimes or certain things may happen more in the U.S., but to act like it's only a U.S. thing obviously is not correct. And obviously statistics are tough too because there's a lot of numbers involved, and there's a lot of people here versus a smaller country that might have a very small amount of people. Granted, I know our percentage is higher here, most likely. Just saying, I'm not writing this off. I'm just saying this happens everywhere, not just the U.S.
You might have to watch out for hurricane season in some parts of the country. But again, these are small concerns. What about crime? Well, according to the FCO, very few visitors have been involved in America's notorious gang/gun crimes, although some have been caught up in drug-related violence close to the Mexican border. Brits are also told to not walk into areas off the beaten path in big cities alone at night, but on the whole, unlike many countries the FCO talks about, the US has no extreme warnings for Brit visitors. The Australian government mirrors that opinion. If you exercise normal safety precautions, i.e. don't go looking for trouble, the USA poses no great risk for travelers. Again, a handful of terrorist attacks are mentioned, and gun crime is also mentioned. You are also warned to read about the place you will be visiting regarding crime, but you are told visitors are very rarely the target of violence in the US. So, looking at those sites, you might think the USA is a very safe place to visit. But how much crime exists in the country? After all, OECD data for 2018 tells us America locks up more of its population than any other country by a large margin. It said that in 2018, for every 100,000 people in the USA, 655 people are imprisoned. Prison policy tells us the American criminal justice system holds almost 2.3 million people in 1,719 state prisons, 102 federal prisons, 1,852 juvenile correctional facilities, 3,163 local jails, and 80 Indian country jails. By the way, the UK locks up 138 people for every 100,000, and that was the 14th place country on the list. In second place was Turkey at 287 per 100,000. Does this mean America is unsafe?
Okay, so second place right behind the USA, Turkey, 287 per 100,000. If you remember, that is still basically a third of our number here in the U.S. That is staggering. I will say that. Wow. Again, this is not new. I already knew that we had kind of a out-of-control number when it comes to imprisoned people. But wow, that is... I didn't know it was that quite of a gap. That's pretty bad.
though, or are too many people in prison for small non-violent crimes?
Right.
Let's look at violence. If you compare world homicide rates, the USA has nothing on countries like Venezuela, El
Of
Salvador,
course.
Jamaica, Brazil, and its next door neighbor, Mexico.
Right.
The FBI hasn't yet released its full report for 2017, but in 2016, it says regarding murder and non-negligent manslaughter, there were 5.4 instances per 100,000 people.
Right.
Assaults were 250.6 per 100,000.
Now, assaults, obviously it'd be nice to get that down. But if you look at the top number here, that's very low. Okay, very low. Doesn't scream dangerous to me, right?
Rapes were 25.1 or 41.2 per 100,000, depending on legacy definition and revised definition, respectively.
Again, that's actually, I would think, somewhat low. Of course, it should be 0. Let me go, saying that. That's still too high. I'm just saying I feel like that's not terribly high, but of course it should be lower than that. But I can't imagine that this is like 10 times the amount of other countries around the world.
Respectively, if we compare the murder rate to those countries we mentioned before, it is very low in the USA. Mexico is around 4 times higher, and Venezuela is around 18 times higher.
Yikes.
But what about other developed countries? The UK murder rate was 1.2 per 100,000 in 2016. In fact, most developed nations hover around 1 per 100,000. So you could say the US murder rate is very high, given how developed it is and how rich it is. In terms of rich countries regarding GDP, China has a low murder rate, and India has a low mid-murder rate at 3.2 per 100,000. Russia and Brazil are 2 other rich nations with high murder rates. If you really want to stay out of the way of violent crimes in the USA, maybe don't go where they are most prevalent. FBI data tells us where those places are. Number 1 on that list is Baltimore, Maryland, at 98.6 violent crimes.
Now, these stats, there's something to look at, and it's good to get a baseline number. I'm not going to go into this in this video too much, but let me just say around the USA, stats aren't everything. For example, our media here in the US, I don't know how it is elsewhere in the world, but our media loves to bash on the border and act like act like the US and Mexico are always, like this at each other's necks. And that's just crazy. We're extreme trading partners. We share a lot of, culture from each other, a lot of food, a lot of awesome people. It is not like that. I feel like overall there is a good relationship. I feel like overall Mexico is one of the most beautiful countries on earth, and has some of the most awesome culture you could ask for. Some awesome people. You can't believe everything the media says. Now, I know stats are another thing, but let me tell you, remember, I just got back. I lived on the border for almost a year. We lived in southern New Mexico on the border of Texas, New Mexico, and then the country of Mexico. And let me tell you, it is not like what you see on the news. It's extremely nice, very well groomed, beautiful area, mountains everywhere, beautiful desert, awesome sunny weather, and excellent food, excellent stuff to do, excellent people, very, very safe. Keep in mind, El Paso, Texas, on the border here, which was right down the street from us, where we hung out a lot, is right on the border of Mexico, of Chihuahua, the state of Chihuahua. And El Paso is in the top 5 for big cities, safest in the country, usually ranked 3rd or 4th. It is extremely safe, for example, compared to Chicago, where we are back again now. Chicago's nowhere near the border. El Paso's on the border. What's safer? El Paso's much safer if we go by the numbers. Finally, I don't mean to rant too long here, but the numbers, even Baltimore, I've never been there, so I can't speak for there. But when you're talking about some of these worst cities, don't write them off either. Most of the crime probably happens in one area. These are big cities. As long as you stay maybe in touristy areas on the opposite side of the city, you're going to be fine. So, again, you can't buy too hard into stats either. But
per 10,000
that's just my
people.
thoughts.
Number 2 on that list is Memphis, Tennessee, at 97.4 violent crimes per 10,000 people.
Right.
Number 3 is St. Louis, Missouri, at 91.5 violent crimes per 10,000.
Yeah, and for example, in St. Louis, I think there's a lot of really nice places, especially in western St. Louis, and I've always felt safe there, so it's kind of bizarre.
People. Number 4 is Little Rock, Arkansas, at 87.4 violent crimes per 10,000 people. And number 5 on that list is Birmingham, Alabama, at 86.1 violent crimes per 10,000 people. Are those rates of violence high? It depends on how we define violence. We guess it's all kinds of violence that ended with an arrest. If so, the 2017 stats for London, UK, where street fights are common, we are told for every 1,000 people, there were 22 violent crimes. That's 220 per 10,000. And who wouldn't visit Buckingham Palace because they thought London was unsafe? No one. So perhaps the USA is not all that dangerous if if indeed you don't do anything stupid. What about
Right.
where all the people want to visit? Statistics tell us that New York City and Los Angeles are the most visited cities in the USA. Are you
Okay.
safe to visit those places? Most websites seem to think so, even though we are told there are some areas you perhaps might want to miss when out alone at night. Walk of
Right.
New York says crime is way down in NYC, and forget about all those old movies that depict the city as a hotbed of violent crime. We are told violence against tourists is very, very rare. One person on TripAdvisor was concerned about walking the streets at night. A New Yorker responded as follows: "Your family should stop watching crime TV shows and movies. You have nothing to worry about." Other respondents didn't disagree. What about LA? Surely this city is full of hidden dangers. Well, some websites do say you might avoid Skid Row or a night walk alone in South Central, but still, the website Safe Around doesn't give LA a high danger rating in any categories.
Okay.
A Brit asked on TripAdvisor in 2016 if he would be safe wandering around LA at night. One person replied, "You'll have wandered into dodgier areas of Blackpool more times than you're ever likely to wander into a dodgy area of LA." Most people said it is safe,
Interesting.
but being so large, just check out where you are visiting and be sensible. That way you'll almost definitely stay out of harm's way. While
Right.
there are still certainly many boys in the hood, it's generally thought LA is safe on the whole. We even looked at warnings for the popular Venice Beach, and the website warned us about ear infections from swimming. It didn't mention getting held at knife point by skinheads or shot to ribbons for your shoes. One person on TripAdvisor did say it wasn't safe at night though. Again, we think if you exercise caution, many of LA's hotspots should be just fine.
Right.
Okay, so let's not paint too
And remember, that should go for anywhere, whether you're in the safest country in the world or the worst country in the world, right? That's just common sense. It shouldn't. We shouldn't get too obsessed with stats. Stats are everything when it comes to these rankings and all that. I get that. I'm removing myself from that for a second and just thinking wherever I go, even if it's beautiful and safe or sketchy looking and not safe, whatever the case. You just got to be smart, right? Never look too flashy. Be nice, be cordial, and just basically don't do anything sketchy. Don't do anything that would get you in a bad situation, and you should be all right. I think that's the best thing to take from this type of topic.
much of a pretty picture here. In 2018, Reuters wrote that the USA came in 10th in a poll of countries in the world where women risked sexual violence, harassment, and coercion into sex. PBS opens the story in 2017, stating racism remains a prevalent problem in the United States. But that was based on a poll about how people think and not necessarily related to aggression. In general, it's thought the USA is LGBT friendly, but a 2017 article in the New York Times points out that that isn't the case in all parts of the country. What the story was referring to, though, was how LGBT people have more rights and are protected by more laws in some states than in others. Hostel World tells us New York City and Washington, D.C. are very LGBT friendly, but many cities in the USA should be okay. If you
Yeah, one thing I should have said at the beginning of the video that makes sense, especially what he just pointed out for LGBT laws and all these different things. You can't really make a blanket statement about the USA as a whole, right? It's just such a big country. There's literally 50 states, and they all have their own version of certain laws. They all have their own cultures. They all have their own demographics. It's just all different, right? And that's what makes the U.S. tick. It's what makes it appealing. That's part of the reason I love the USA, is just because each state has a different feel, has a different look. They're all a little bit different, right? They have different food, different prices on stuff, all these different things. It could be annoying, I can see, too, for certain reasons, I suppose. But like I said, you can't say America's not safe. Yes, certain places are not safe and certain places are. And then, of course, if you're talking about political issues, certain areas might be more accepting of this, and certain areas, unfortunately, might not be as of accepting yet of certain things, right? It just varies.
You want to drive from city to city? Is it dangerous to do that in the USA? In 2016, there were 11.59 deaths per 100,000 people in the US. How does that compare to other countries?
Well, I could tell you that. Let me just comment on that. There are some bad drivers here. Always, again, just be safe. Doesn't matter what city you're in. Just be safe, be vigilant. You should always be safe when you're driving. Driving is an awesome thing, but it's very dangerous technically as well. And you should always protect your life and your loved ones in a car. Always be safe. And if you're a good driver, you're a safe driver, you don't get road rage, you stay away from sketchy looking cars or trucks that are weaving or something, you'll be good as long as you're vigilant, right?
Well, it's a bit like the murder rate. It's quite high for a developed country, but not so high compared to nations that don't have the same advanced infrastructure and modern law enforcement. We might add that if you come from a small nation, driving on some of the USA's highways for the first time can be a little scary. Driving around LA, for instance, can get confusing. As for other dangers, you won't get malaria, although there's a minuscule chance of contracting dengue fever in some states. It's nothing to worry about, though. Depending on where you are, you could also get eaten by a bear or an alligator, bitten by a rattlesnake or a black widow spider, or have your leg munched on by a great white shark. But Jaws was
Yes, the classic wildlife thing. Americans love to say, like, for example, good chunk of my audience, Australia, love you guys, amazing country, amazing people, and incredible wildlife, right? They have some crazy animals, spiders, snakes, all these different things. And Americans love to paint Australia as like this dangerous place, like, oh my God, everything wants to kill me here. But you know what? One could argue that everything in America wants to bite you, sting you, kill you too, because we have some wicked stuff here. Some Aussies even admit, nope, screw America. You guys have some crazy stuff. You guys have way more dangerous wildlife. So it's up in the air. Everyone thinks a little different there. But yeah, depending on where you're at, you're going to have to worry more about, like a mountain lion or something more than getting mugged.
It's just a movie, and we can say again that these things might happen to you as much as that piano might drop on your head. So in conclusion, we think that the dangers present in America are much less than movies and TV might have you think.
Yes.
There certainly is a lot of gun crime for such an advanced country, but much of that happens in certain areas, and visitors are unlikely to get caught up in it. If you don't exercise caution and decide to run wild, you might find yourself in trouble, but if you take it easy, you should have no problems in the US. As for where the country comes on our danger list, we think the list now goes like this, from safest to most dangerous: China, USA, Russia, Mexico, Syria.
All right, so there you go. What do you think? Now, of course, everyone is allowed to have their opinion, and that's totally fine. I know there are some people that have commented on my channel before that, hey, they like the idea of America. They think parts of it are beautiful. It's awesome, but they're afraid to come here just because of what they see on TV. You know, of course, big tragic events that we've all seen lately, and, the whole pro-gun culture and these things. Now, of course, those are valid concerns. People are allowed to think what they think. But let me just say, for what it's worth, it is a safe place. It's a beautiful country. And if anyone ever wanted to come here, of course, draw your own conclusions, do your own research. But let me just say, it is not as bad as I think some people make it out to be. Of course, people on the internet definitely exaggerate or talk in radical thoughts sometimes. And maybe paint it as like this crazy wasteland where everyone's killing each other every day. Let me just say it's not like that, okay? It's a very beautiful place, very safe place. I feel very safe here. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's the safest place on earth. Remember, I'm a proud American, but I'm not a pro-American as in like, oh, we're the best, everyone else sucks. No, never ever will I say that. That is not the case. But I can just say, I've been to Chicago many times, which is known as one of the most dangerous places in America. Trust me, a lot of areas are very safe, very beautiful, a lot of fun stuff to do, and you should be fine. And then, of course, I've lived on the border. I've lived on the border of the U.S. and Mexico. Beautiful area, awesome place, perfect weather, and I loved it. Felt extremely safe. And, those two things are not what you'd hear on media, maybe, perhaps. So can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please throw a thumbs up on this video if you enjoyed it. It will really help the video out. I do appreciate it. And of course, subscribe to join our amazing community we have on this channel. Okay, it is one of the best, and we're on our way to 100K, so I really need your help. I appreciate it. And check that description for this original video. You can watch it in its entirety, uninterrupted, as well as other ways you can interact with me, support me, things like that. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, guys. Catch you later.